Hi, I'm so glad to be here with you today. My name is Dr. Mary Elizabeth Brown, and I'm here to tell you a story. I'm a violinist by trade and training. I'm a concert violinist. I'm about 20 years into my career at this point. And you can see here some of the cool things that have happened along the way. Some early years, some middle years, after about years as a symphonic concertmaster, and also as a soloist. So I am not a science developer. I don't have any of the amazing skills that you have, nor do I have this education. I've done some other things, but not in tech officially. So I'm not an official scientist. But I am really good at asking the question, what if? And I've asked that question again and again over the last few years. And to be here with you, looked at things differently. So I looked at things differently by asking what if in three big chapters in my life. The first was a little more than 11 years ago when I founded one of the first web-based music education programs in the world. And I asked, hey, what if we use technology to make things more accessible? And then came this next chapter, where I asked, what if my identity as a didn't get in the way of me achieving the things that I really wanted to achieve? And lastly, what I got to share is, what if we printed a violin? So let me tell you a story. We're going to do three things together today. I'm to be here together. And then we're going to look at some of the strategies that you can use if ever you had an idea, but you weren't really sure. Or if maybe you needed that little bit of a nudge or a little bit of courage to take that next step. And then we're going to have a look at this, but through how can you be a mom? Or I should just have a little aside here and say, I see this through the lens of motherhood because I am a mom. But we are all, in one way or another, caretakers of people around us. So if you are not somebody who that doesn't exclude you from this conversation. So here we go. Let me tell you a story. Way back when, I was in the Arabian desert, a couple of hours outside of Abu Dhabi, sitting on a sand dune. And I thought, hey, I can talk to my here. Why can't we get music here? Now we think about this as pretty much plain day, everyday. Since the pandemic, so much activities have moved to be online. But 11 years ago, Zoom was not an everyday thing, and especially years. So this is a new thing. I asked this crazy question: what if we used video and teleconferencing technology to get music education out here? Everybody told me I was nuts. What started then is now the Aviva Young Artists Program. We serve families of young musicians on 5 continents. And our students go on to places like Berklee College of Music, Johns Hopkins University, Peabody Conservatory, McGill, all sorts of wonderful spots. But not only that, they're able to access music wherever they are in the world, thanks to being able to leverage technology, coding, and all of the amazing things that maybe you do really well. Now, anybody who is a primetime medical drama fan and who is of a certain age may get this reference. Mid-2017, I happened to ask the question, if you can print a portal vane, why can't you print a violin? I see smiles. Some people recognize that reference. And thus began what is now this wonderful adventure of using 3D polymers, physics, and acoustics to make music education just a little bit more accessible. Before I go any farther, how many of you know anything about 3D printing? Anybody? It's okay. Okay. And how many of you have had the experience of printing something or working with an STL file? Amazing. Okay, so it's not completely straightforward, and this was therefore this was a project to be in several steps. So in 2018, we asked this question, and we got some money from the Canada Council. At that point, I was the concertmaster of the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra, and they supported this wonderful project. And we just set out to answer this question: what if you printed a violin? And the result was this. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is not quite what I was expecting. Okay, can I try? Wow, that's very different from what I thought. It's a different color of sound from a wooden violin. So it sounds like a violin. Yet it sounds like a violin. And that was the first, or I should say the beginning of this first chapter. Now what you see here are a couple of outtakes from that stage in the project. So as a part of this, we commissioned a composer named Terry Pavlakis to write us a concerto based on the idea to be involved in writing it, to explore what these instruments can do. So this is during one of the rehearsals. We were involved at that point with an industrial printing lab in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so you'll see there's an STL file in the making as we were looking at some of the different options for how it is we would shape and manufacture this instrument. And this is not a Subway bread oven. This is an industrial 3D printer, and that is a 3D violin in making. So fast forward a couple of years. As with many things involving grants, the grant ran out, the project sort of became dormant, but the Toledo Symphony Orchestra took over, and they said, hey, this is great. What would happen if we used recycled materials? And they came up with this idea of a rod-based design. So printing everything in parts and then assembling it with a metal piece in the middle. As you'll see here, these are some of the designs that they so graciously lent me for this presentation. And the project came back to Canada at the beginning of last year. So my program served as young violinists all over the world, and we saw an opportunity to say, what if? What if the cost of creating come down enough that this could be accessible? What if we could put more violins into more hands? What if we could design them in a way that made it easier to maintain? And so we were able to get the cost down, the printing cost down, to about $7 US. We presented it at the Acoustical Society of the Americas conference, really just looking for feedback from people in the room, and the next thing we knew, it was international news. So how did we do it? We started again, but from the very beginning. What you see here is a model of the Strad. So Stradivari was a violin maker who lived in Cremona, Italy in the 18th century. And his violins, also cellos, are prized. They go for millions and millions of dollars. You can see this, the Strad, in the Library of Congress Museum. It's a very famous instrument. We pulled the measurements and created our scale file. Then we decided to look a little bit at how acoustics work and how resonance works, and we modified the belly of the instrument to give it a slightly different tone. So the belly, you'll see, is this curved part in the middle of the instrument. So we pulled the measurements from a similar violin maker, the Galliano family, who was working at the same time, but down the road in Naples. His instruments had slightly bigger bellies. And then we experimented with some different materials. So here, you'll see there's a black violin. That was printed in ABS. That, let's say, not such a success. Oops. And then we see a violin that's printed in PLA, which, because of its various physical properties, was a really great candidate for what we needed to do. And then we get into printing patterns. So I will leave some of the technical physics aside and say that in 3D printing, we have the option to fill in whatever it is we're printing, hollow little spaces. So if you think about wood is porous. If we're going to recreate something that's resonant, we should probably think about that. So we started to experiment with various different infill patterns, and we found that some worked better than others. Now, anybody who's played the violin knows that nothing on the violin is glued. Everything is held in place by tension. And that means that if you live far off in the middle of nowhere, if you'd like to play the violin, that's great, but if your bridge falls over or the soundpost falls, you're really in trouble because you need somebody to fix it for you. So we said, what if we printed them in? And we did. So now those little movable pieces are an integral part of the design of the instrument. And then we made them little for kids, because these were designed to be an accent. They've been designed to replace fine instruments. They've never been designed to take over that part of the market. They've been designed to give people a leg up. And so, here's a team time. And a teeny tiny human to go with it. So let's look at some of the costs here. Way back when we started this, we were looking at complete costs of $1,200. That's in no way accessible to people. And the folks in Toledo, they did a bang-up job, and they got this down to 137 US dollars. We were so grateful for that. And then we were, thanks to the many over the course of the pandemic, and in recent years, we were able to get this printed cost down to about $7 US, and it can be printed on any normal printer in your home or in the makerspace at your library. So really, anybody can do this, you just need the file. So why did we do this? We'll get into this question in a second, but why did we do this? We did this because everybody should have access to music and to making music if they want to. And this way, we can get a violin into the hands of a person literally anywhere in the world with a 3D printer. These are actually two students from the program who fit that profile. This is Issa, who was violin on a sailboat. Until very recently, she lived on a sailboat off the coast of New Zealand. And violinist, we had some MacGyver moments as we tried to figure out how to fix her bridge without a luthier anywhere in sight. It involved clamps and ship repair tools and a tea kettle. This is a viable alternative to that. And this is Ellie, who grew up in rural Arizona, several hours from the nearest major center. Same thing, this would have made her life very different at that point. School music programs are, at the moment, tremendous numbers of cuts. And we've heard from school education programs all over the world saying, hey, our tech department has 3D printers, can we use this? So this makes it, again, accessible, not just for private study, but for kids. And here's the cool thing. I think that if you're anything like me, you might see a certain kind of silo effect when it comes to the arts and technology. Like, you're either an arts person or a tech person, but I don't think that's really the case. It's been my experience early on, but this provides us a way to help young people to do both at the same time and to take ownership of it as they do it. And given that music education is so expensive and the average entry-level violin will cost you between $500 and $1,000, this really reduced the cost as very fast. So that's kind of how we ended up here today. Let's talk a little bit about crossing boundaries. Has anyone ever had an idea of something that they wanted to do inside of their day-to-day tech job or their day-to-day arts job? You don't have to raise your hand, it's okay. I think we've all had those moments. And so here are some of the things that I use on a daily basis to continually cross boundaries and to deal with some of those self-limiting thoughts that come along the way. This idea of challenging our internal thinking is really important. So what if I told you that I could never be successful because my nose is crooked? It is. If you talk to me later, you'll see it's just a little bit crooked. What would you tell me? You'd probably tell me I'm crazy, right? Yeah. But we all have these thoughts every once in a while. They're really common, and they're called cognitive or thought distortions. And they're things that we can be mindful of to help us along our way. So, my crooked nose being a barrier to success kind of falls into all of these black and white thinking. People with crooked noses don't succeed. Right? You laugh because it seems so ridiculous, but these are internal conversations that almost everybody has at one point. Okay, maybe not up the nose, but everybody has at one point or another. If my nose is time, I won't be able to do this. That's a good example of fortune telling. Or, I should have not played that soccer game that made my nose broken. Right? These are all things that happen in our internal dialogues that can really hold us back. So what do we do about them? It's time to ask some questions. We can base our internal dialogues and be mindful of what we do by asking questions. Is it true? That's just factually untrue. There are lots of people with crooked noses who have done great things in life. Do I need more information? Maybe. Am I feeling discouraged or frustrated? This is a way for my brain to get out of it. Do I need to learn something? That's also. Is there enough way to frame this? My crooked nose gives me character. Have I ever navigated? What do I notice in my body if I think about that crooked nose? Do I feel a sense of happiness or do I feel anxiety about it? Would I prefer to do something else? Would I prefer to explore another road to success? And so of my brain telling me, or my emotions telling me, this is not a great fit for me. So, here we come to our question of why. And right at the end of that story that I told you, we went through several reasons why that project was important. It was important to me to give access to young people. It was important to me to be able to help. And it was important for me to be able to share something that was really important to me early on. So anytime I come up against a wall, I come back to this. What is the why? What is the why that got you there? Thinking about that amazing project that you wanted to pursue. Establishing that why in the beginning is a really important part of any kind of boundary crossing attempt, because you're going to need to lean on it eventually. That thing that you want to do, does it solve a problem for somebody? Is it meaningful to you? Is it something that you believe in? Does it make financial sense? Are you going to do something that might come in later? Do I believe in it enough to see me through hard times? And is it energy? Because we all know we have finite amounts of energy. All right. So we found our why. We overcome and dismantle thought distortions, and we've come up with something wonderful to ask the question, why? So now what do you do when you realize that your background is in music, but you need to know about physics and coding? You start by figuring out what you know already. And so often we don't give ourselves credit for those things, those qualities and those skills that we already have. When was the last time you were reminded of the fact that you're courageous and you're creative? When was the last time you remembered that that amazing ability that you have to be analytical with systems and write code, that that's something that you can transfer to other parts of your life? When was the last time you remembered that you have overcome so many obstacles, whether it was in school, in life, in your first job, your next job, however many jobs, in your personal life maybe? How many times have you adapted, made friends, networked, done all of those things? Those are things that are in you already. And they're great resources as we continue to move forward. So, after those, sometimes we do need to learn things. I definitely needed to learn things. I knew nothing about polymers and I knew nothing about physics. And when we went out on our own to do this, the learning curve was really, really steep. I think that there is often a misconception that we need to go back to school and have a degree in order to do something new. But the bottom line answer to that is no, you don't. There are so many sources of information that can help you to learn. So online resources, you're super smart. You can read a research paper and figure out what you need to know without discipline. When was the last time you asked a friend or somebody in your network if they knew about that thing you really wanted to? Chances are that person is going to be super thrilled that you connected to them and you wanted to know. Went to the library and cracked open a book, or went to a workshop or a conference. There are all these resources that don't necessarily cost money and don't necessarily involve a time commitment like a degree that can really help you to cross those boundaries. So what happens when you have established your why, you've done the learning that you need to do, and you're still coming up against roadblocks? I like to call those bottlenecks. I know that for folks in the tech world, bottlenecks are a little bit different. But in the entrepreneurship world, they sometimes look like this. And this is my model. This is what I pull out when I come up against something that I'm not sure about. So if I have dismantled whatever negative thought process about it, I'm sure I'm headed in the right direction, it aligns with my why. And I have the skill set that I need It's time for me to unpack it one more step and say, is it something I don't know? Is it something I don't like? Or is it something I'm not good at? I don't know about you, I don't like doing things I don't like or I'm not good at. These are some of the options that I use. For example, you can learn a skill. You can match them up. You can learn a skill with a reward at the end. Like, if I learn this skill, I'll go out for ice cream with my kids. If I learn a skill, I have a future ahead of me. That's the reward and the best one. We can automate things, we can delegate things. Depending on where you are in your process, you can even outsource it to someone who, guess what, is good at it. Good at it and likes it. Chances are, whatever it is, like somebody else who is good at it, would be glad to help you with it. Things that really come in handy as I try to unpack those roadblocks or bottlenecks on a daily basis. So in my story, this has all happened within the scheme of motherhood. And if you read the brochure, in the scheme of motherhood, talk about what that means and how that looks, because whether you identify as a parent or the care of somebody close to you, or just a caregiver of the people who are dear to you, there are always opportunities to use this lens. So here's the first one. This I come back to really, really frequently, which is to reframe your mindset. Let me tell you, the research is very clear. If you are a woman, to be able to do these sorts of things is hard. We have unequal work and pay. There are all sorts of things in terms of the mental load of a wife, a mother, a partner, any of those things. If you're looking for a reason not to do it, you don't have to look very far. There is always an excuse, and it's a valid one. It's hard. But when we reframe that mindset and we say, hey, it's hard, but I'm just going to do it anyway, that's a really empowering moment. And then when you say, it's hard, I'm going to do it anyway, and I am going to do everything in my power, like being here with you today, to say, I'm going to help a next generation or help other women to not do the same or not have the same, then it becomes not only a change of mindset, but a change in life philosophy. So, reframing your mindset as you embark on any of these journeys is a wonderful tool. Now, I'm not from Montreal. I moved here 8 years ago. And I have come to see very quickly that trying to fight the seasons here is a futile battle, right? The first winter without a proper winter coat, like I thought I could do that, and I thought I could do that with like a budget pair of boots. That was awful. I was cold and I was miserable. So much of my development as an entrepreneur, mother at the same time, followed that same advice. Embracing the season you're in is a very powerful tool for survival. My daughter is now 6. We're in a different season now from when she was an infant. And as anybody knows, you don't have to have a perfectly matched snowsuit and perfectly matched accessories to be warm and have fun skiing. So, progress over perfection, friends. Progress over perfection. The next of great importance to me is this idea of valuing and protecting family time. The work of an entrepreneur, and to my understanding also to a degree work in tech, often encroaches on family time. And it's been absolutely essential to block out and protect that precious time, and to do so rather unapologetically. This very comforting quote early on, and I should say her daughter Jane Saturday was 14 months old. I attributed my success in school to teaching. I felt respite from the. I went to class about 8:30 a.m. and I came home at 4 p.m. It was a total break in my day, and children until Jane went to sleep. This was wonderful, wonderful inspiration in the early years of motherhood, to the point where my daughter, until the pandemic hit, when asked what I did, told her daycare educators and friends' parents that I just stayed at home all day and didn't do anything. Little did I know that that would come as a parenting win later on. So I think that it's important to realize that we can quite possibly have it all, but we may not be able to have it all at the same time, if that makes any sense. So do we free up the time to have it all? Because there is a finite amount of energy and a finite number of hours in every day. Now, I feel like I'm speaking to the educated here about automated systems. But if ever you are in this is my of the things that I automate in my household, so that I don't have to worry about them, they don't take up brain space, and they just are on automatic repeat. And by doing this, it gives me extra time to spend with my kiddo, and it means that everything is taken care of. In the great words of James Clear, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So systems everywhere. Now, speaking of systems, my little one is a little bit bigger now. She's 6. And we have routines and systems now where we sit together every day, incorporating her into my work as an entrepreneur and in tech has been life-changing for both of us. We have a tradition. Early risers, anyone with a 6-year-old will probably commiserate. Very early risers, and we both spend some time in the morning sitting next to each other at the dining room table doing our respective work. So for her, that's her reading and math and writing practice, and for me, that's and so what you'll see here is a sketch of this talk. And she had asked what it was I was working on, and I explained that I was going to come and talk about what we do at our house to make it work, the two of us. And she said, oh, could I help? And I said, sure, go right ahead. And for anyone who's not well versed in 6-year-old writing, the first one says, we feed. And the next one says, we listen to trolls, as in the soundtrack to the Trolls movie, while we do our chores. So this is an example of how you can invite a young person into this world of the work that you do in an age-appropriate and healthy way. In our case, it means that she has a window into what it is to work hard, what it is to innovate, what it is to create something, what it is to share that with people. Also, what it is. I was saying to someone earlier, so illustration, because she was absolutely blown away that there was a place grown up about code. So she's 6 and she codes. She does that because, and I'm a little slow on the uptake, so I started with Strad. I invited her along the way. She also got to see a parent model what it is to learn something new, model what it is to do something hard. I wasn't very good at it at first. Model what a growth mindset looks like. Model what it is to stick with something. So the following what her favorite memory was of being involved. We had not already seen the resemblance. This is from the Hong Kong Economic Times in December, which an article on these violins is my dear daughter, who was involved in testing them out, who was involved in printing test prints of little tiny owls, of all sorts of things. To involve her in this has been a way of giving her access to extraordinary experience, but to set her up for a lifetime of what may be art, in innovation. Right? To model that for her is something very powerful. So I'd invite you to consider that in your own lives as you consider these to involve them in a way that's meaningful but appropriate. For efficiency, here's a rundown of the motherhood list. Create the systems that work for you, not those systems for everybody else. At the time you need, involve them in appropriate ways, involve them in your learning process, adjust your expectations, model your growth mindset, celebrate together, and embrace the messiness. Because entrepreneurship is always, and it's wonderful to see that through. One thing that but you would have recognized in the little sketch that I showed you is the idea of mentorship. And so my challenge to you today is, if you are feeling lost, to reach out to somebody who is close, who could mentor you through this process. I have been incredibly fortunate to be close to some amazing women who have offered advice, a listening ear, at times, honest feedback, and all of these sorts of things. And if you don't have a mentor, you can reach out, because I think it's really important for us to help each other and to connect. Questions?